Yes, folks, it's 5 p.m. Central. It's time for Deanna and Jeremy Brakefield and the Neurodivergent News Live. Take it away, Queen of Neurodivergency, Deanna.
I am going to break him of that habit eventually. But welcome again. It is another episode of Neurodivergent News Live. I'm almost literally bouncing in my seat because today's topic is just going to be so much fun. I am Deanna Brakefield, owner of Lionheart Kingdom Market and neurodivergent advocate. Today I have with me again my amazing husband, Jeremy. Go ahead and take a moment.
Hello, I am Jeremy Brakefield, co-host of Neurodivergent News, and your co-pilot into what is probably the crazy and unknown. Have a nice day.
I can't doubt that it's definitely crazy at times, and I'm surprised every day by how much I don't know. We also have with us an amazing counselor and consultant who is a pioneer in the driven community, as he would say. Stone, please.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Stone G. I'm a counselor for driven people, neurodivergent, and I'm happy to be here.
And so today, our special guest, she is our superhero because our guest decided that they had an emergency that, well, we won't go into that. But Gabi is absolutely amazing. We have the resilient voice media expert and neurodivergent mom, Gabi Garland, please.
Oh, I'm supposed to introduce myself. So my name is Gabi Garland. I live in just outside the DC area. I have a little boy who is autistic, and I have ADD or ADHD myself. So neurodivergency is something very familiar to my personal life on a daily basis.
And that's really the goal of shows like this, is to not just make it, a focus and something that's in our everyday life, but where people really understand what it's like to live in our households and be in a constructive relationship with us. So today we're going to be talking about neurodivergent parenting. And I'm not just talking about raising kids that are a little bit different, but being a parent who is just a little bit different in that scenario and what that means. So usually we throw it to Stone and let him throw a few words in first thing. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to be clear in that my practice does not focus on children, pediatrics, or anything like that. I only work with adults. That being said, there is a lot more information available now than when I was a child on being an effective parent for neurodivergent children. And we could probably stop the podcast right now and say, just by saying, love them as much as you possibly can. But then we wouldn't have a podcast. So we're going to go into some of the attributes of that.
Get into some specifics.
Okay, since you opened your mouth, what are your thoughts?
Well, to an extent, I agree with Stone. At the end of the day, it comes down to love them every chance you get. Don't let the day-to-day get in between you and giving them that love. Because at the end of the day, we all love our kids. I mean, it's kind of a no-duh sort of statement. But it's, for a lot of parents, they let the day-to-day get between them and showing their kids that love, because I've got to get them ready for this something. So I've got to be hard on Jimmy so that he gets stronger and he can, but at the end of the day, that comes between the love.
Okay, Miss Gabi, first thoughts?
What's that?
First thoughts?
I think one of the easiest or quickest ways to not be able to show up for them is that we're not showing up for ourselves. I think for me personally, we, on top of being autistic, he also has a heart condition. And one of the pieces of advice from his cardiologist we got very early on in his diagnosis was, don't put limits on him, let him show you what his limits are. And I feel like that can be really applied to neurodivergency as well, because I think when you talk about it on a spectrum, you can pigeonhole your kid and be like, oh, well, he doesn't do this, so he can never do this. Or, you start kind of deciding where you're going to put them instead of letting them experience the world in all the different ways. And I think that that part goes to the loving of them, because you need to love all of the way that they are and give them opportunities to show you and grow and get to be normal kids, because they are normal. They're just normal in a way that we're not accustomed to. And so I think that for me is what I would think about it.
Okay, so that's been our show. I mean, I think we summed it up really, really well. As everybody love them and let them be that. Okay, I'm kidding. So, I mean, we're talking about parenting that doesn't necessarily look like parenting to outsiders. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been criticized by the way that I treat my kids, but in the same breath, they tell me how well behaved my kids are. And it just kind of leaves you in a whirlwind of confusion, because I know that the way I interact with my kids does not feel like the way that my parents interacted with me.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways on this, I think that our parents didn't really know what to do with the neurodivergent kids, because neurodivergency, if you look back historically, we have always existed, but we existed in very specific places. They, way back when, they would look for people with specific skill sets like what we would have, the way we would think. And so because of the apprentice journeyman sort of way things were done, I feel like a lot of us, we were found and put where we would be have our best growth and have our best chance for having our own personal success. And so for me, I feel like we have to figure out how to do that in the modern day. We have to figure out how to look at each other, see where each other is and what each other needs, and be able to try and grow from there, instead of trying to cookie cutter every kid gets the same thing, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, I think with what you're sharing, it does make sense, only that's not the reality that we're living in. And especially when we look at education, going into academia, there's a performer, there's this expectation that everyone's going to do the same thing, everyone's going to learn the same thing, even though what we're forcing children to learn is not really learning, and it doesn't actually prepare them for being adults, for being functional human beings. So personally, if I had to do it all over again, I would not send my children to school. I would have homeschooled them rather than put them through the meat grinder, where it tells them that they're different, tells them that they can't or can do certain things because they're proclivities. We still have a lot of work to do.
I think,
and
okay.
There's something that you were mentioning earlier, Deanna, about when you have a parent who's neurodiverse and a child who's neurodiverse, and they're both on the brink of a meltdown. How does that look? And I know for myself, when I've noticed myself having that sensation of dysregulation, and then noticing my child is not feeling okay, anything that's happening for me, I forget about it because I'm focusing on my child, and I just want to make sure that they're okay. And it doesn't matter where we are. I just stop and I attend to whatever's happening for them. But results may vary. That maybe that's not what happens for all parents.
Let me ask you this, Don. Have in that moment where you're like partially dysregulated and you recognize that your child is as well, have you ever attempted to take a step back and look at yourself objectively as to what is it in that moment that allows you to set your own dysregulation to the side to take care of them? Because as I understand it, not everyone possesses that ability. That is something that is not necessarily unique to people like us, but I feel like it's more cultivated in people that think along the lines the way we do.
Yeah, that I think that what you're talking about, a lot of it, I share in my book, and the short answer is, when I got my diagnosis, I did a deep dive into understanding as many aspects of neurodivergence as I could. And then that's how I became a counselor, and that's why I chose this path. So you're right. It's not something that comes naturally. We do have to work on it. I mean, after all, I'm a combat veteran, and these soft skills of being able to interact and communicate, that's not that's not what we're taught.
Mm.
Gabi?
I think for me, and when we talk about putting kids in school, so I have a daughter who will be 25 next month, and then we have our son who's just turned 6, and she was on the gifted spectrum. So they were like, let's jump her ahead a couple years, and it was where I understood whether you fall in the special needs category or in the gifted category, school is not made for them. And so I think whether there's an advocacy piece that has to happen in the environments that they're in, where you are the parent that is constantly asking for feedback and dropping in school and checking in on things. And I think too often, because we assume in environments where they go into, that they will be taken care of and their needs will be met. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And when you look at self-regulation, when we don't know what's going on, we don't know how to teach them how to regulate themselves in these situations. And so for me with my son, if I'm dysregulated or if I'm overwhelmed or if I'm kind of back against the wall, stressed out, I really do take a moment, take a couple deep breaths, walk into the other room, stand outside, put my feet in the grass. Like there's all these different ways that I'll kind of get myself back together, because one thing that I have learned with him is if I'm heightened, it heightens him more, and it just can go up and up and up and up. And so if I need to figure out the quickest, easiest way to get myself back down to a place where I can help him get to his comfort place and get kind of out of that dysregulated space. But I feel like it's trial and error, and sometimes what you normally do doesn't work next time, and you constantly have to be readjusting what you're doing just to help them and support them when what they need at that time.
I love that. I would ask the question though, this is a bit of a hard question, and I've found myself in this seat more than a few times where the urge to just completely disconnect from what's going on in those heightened states becomes overwhelming. What are y'all's thoughts on tag teaming? Because Jeremy and I have found ourselves in situations where I am at the point where I'm about to break. If I continue to engage in this scenario, they're going to see the worst me, not the mom that they need. And so he goes, I got it. He's completely fresh. He has no attachment to what's going on and allows me to step away, but still handling the child.
Yeah. My husband's great with that. Like, I'll give you an example. This was probably like 2 weeks ago. And I had told somebody I was going to be at a networking meeting like 6 different times. And every morning when I would wake up, something would happen. I was like, I'm finally up. I'm ready. I'm going out the door. And I was going to get him up, get him dressed, and then take him to school and go to my meeting. And when I got him up, he had wet the bed, just like flooded it. And I was like, he needs a bath. Like this is, and as I'm putting him in the bath, my husband was getting out of the shower, and I just started crying because it was just like, just another day that I'm disappointing somebody I said I was going to do something for. And he was like, I got it. I'm going to stay home today. Let me do this. Let me help you with that. And I think you have to have constant communication, even more as parents with a neurodivergent kid than you do. I think you have to have great communication regardless, but I think it's just even a more advanced layer when you've got a neurodivergent kid, because their needs are just completely different on so many ways. And you've got to be kind of lockstep with your partner on how to help each other navigate this stuff. Because sometimes it's just not the day. Like sometimes you're like, I ain't got it today. Like there you go. And other days you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. Get your work done. I'm on it. And I think you've got to be able to balance that as a couple.
Yeah, I there are a few groups out there where it's parents who, it's like support groups for parents who have neurodivergent children, and they're meant to collaborate and add value to one another to potentially make the load lighter. And in some of these groups that I interact in, I hear people just exchanging horror stories about how difficult it is to raise neurodivergent kids, and I don't agree that they're more difficult. It's just different. And if we're using if we're using an holistic lens, then yeah, we can categorize it as difficult, but it's absolutely not difficult. It's just a different way of living. And my children are so deeply loving, and I don't really have an experience of, I mean, sure, there might be a meltdown here and there, but I internally, I don't feel flummoxed or flabbergasted when they're having a meltdown. For me, it's more, oh, they're communicating that something's not working. And there's something else that I've noticed that works really well, and you've alluded to this, Gabi, and it's with self-care. Rather than some people think that self-care is this thing that you do every now and then to support you, and I would contend with that in that self-care is more essential. Self-care is disciplined, impactful, and purposeful. It needs those three elements to exist. It's similar to, let's say, in that scenario that you were mentioning where you needed to go to your meeting, and you got into your car and it wasn't charged, or there was no petrol. Well, that's your fault, because you knew that it was empty when you got home. And so same thing with self-care. Rather than being reactionary, I think as parents, if we are taking care of ourselves, and I'm saying exactly the same thing that you said, I'm just saying it in a different way.
Yeah.
As parents, if we have we put it into our schedule, the habitual, always at the same time, this is our self-care, so that we are able to refuel ourselves, so that we're powerful, that we're present with our family. I think that can be a more efficient approach than, because stuff happens all the time.
Always. I think he understands too, for us, and I don't know, everybody's circumstances are different, but he works out of the house most days. And so he's been home with me since he was born, through the pandemic, post heart surgeries and whatnot. And so, a lot of times I have the lion's share of that, the parenting when I'm home. And he definitely gives me tons of time where I'm like, he's like, go out with your girls, go have lunch, go get a pedicure, whatever. And I do think, but I do think we often don't ask for it enough, or we don't, like you said, make this a thing that is built into our schedule. I admit I probably don't do that as well as I should probably do.
Okay, so this is the point where I have to interrupt the thought flow and remind our listening audience that if you have questions or comments or would like to engage with us, you can reach us at 1724-957-4733. That's 9KPH Red. So I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this. What are some of the personal self-care things that work for you, but that also work for your kids? Because my kids, it seems like the things that bother me are not the things that bother them, and the things that they blow completely out of proportion, I just don't get it. And I understand there's a communication level here. They're still learning to communicate. They may not have the words to express how they're feeling or what they're experiencing. But I know for me, there are certain things that I can do, tools or tricks that will help me start to calm down. How do we teach those to our kids so that we're not just they're not just parroting what we're doing, it's actually effective?
I think if we look at a framework for self-care, so for instance, so you mentioned a few tactics. If you have a framework whereby this is my ecosystem, and your ecosystem has a cycle. So you know that when you wake up in the morning, let's say for example, in the morning you have more energy than you do in the evening. So you can plan your day, plan your schedule based on what you know where your energy is, and by doing that you can provide the best value. So that's, I haven't given you the full framework for that yet for self-care, but I'm alluding to the fact that what is that analogy of putting the oxygen mask on you first before you take care of the people around you?
Mm-hmm.
So, Gabi, you're completely correct. If we're not taking time for self-care, it's weird because we take time for a business. We take time to make sure that we have a home. We take time to blah, 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 but we don't take care of the most important thing, which is this flesh sack, this meat sack that is meant to be doing all the doing.
See, for me, I think this is so important because at the end of the day, you can't lead someone to where you're not or to where you haven't been. I can't teach somebody to fly a plane because I've never flown a plane. If I haven't taken the time to give myself the self-care so that I can maintain my calm, so that I can maintain my thought process, then how am I going to be able to guide a 12-year-old that's going through that, an 8-year-old that's going through that, a 3-year-old that's going through that? I've got to be able to regulate myself before I can help lead them to be regulated.
Yeah. Before we found out about his heart condition, or when we knew his heart condition, we didn't have the autism diagnosis yet. I had gotten Reiki, NLP, and hypnosis certified around probably about a year and a half before we got his last surgery. And one of the things that we've done, that I've done consistently, and we've kind of taught within the family, is doing breathwork patterns and different things for him to get him back down to center. And sometimes it's like really deep pressures, and sometimes it's, him just breathing with me. But that has been a way for us, one, to help him regulate, but it also helps me regulate. So if we're out somewhere and I can't go to the other room and get it together, we're rolling through Target and he's going buck wild, and okay, let's do breathing together. And so I'll hold his hands and we'll breathe together. And then you can literally I can watch the stress come off of both of us and watch us get back down to center. And I think finding different tools that work for you and for your children looks different for all of them in all different scenarios, but those have been really helpful for us. Breathwork specifically in anxious situations has been a godsend for me personally and for him as well. And so I think all parents really need to look at some other ways that they can help, tools for them to learn, because that, even just as humans working in the world, like that's a really powerful tool to help you navigate, stressful situations or being overwhelmed or heightened emotions and things like that. And I think those are there for our help. And so learning those are always something I recommend to everybody.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about that. And what I'm hearing is spoons. You know where his spoons are, and so you're making sure that he's having enough spoons in a particular moment so that he can transition to the next. And there we go, another part of the framework.
Well, I don't know. Have you guys heard this before? I get told all the time that I overshare with my kids because we end up in these like 20, 30, 45-minute long conversations about what they're feeling or what they're thinking. And we talk about examples from my life and examples from their grandparents' life. And people literally think I tell my kids too much, that I overshare and over communicate with them. Do you honestly think that's possible with people that communicate the way we do?
What do your kids say? I mean, that's the litmus test, not other people.
Okay, keep going, because like my thought here is that, okay, obviously if I talk about adult topics, my kids are going to start blushing. They're like, mom, they're typical teenagers. But I have gone so far to actually explain to them what my personal motivations are for doing things and the experiences that I had that shaped those motivations. And they do seem interested, but it also seems like it's too much at the same time sometimes. Have y'all found yourselves in similar situations?
I think with my children, I want to have conversations with them, but they're not interested. They're off with their friends. They're at the age where they've you know, Papa's no longer cool. I was cool. I used to be cool. I think at some point I'll be cool again, and I'll be able to talk to them again. But nah, there's no oversharing. I mean, you're you.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. How many children don't have that? They don't have parents who are interested and want to engage with them. So there's no oversharing. What you're doing that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. No, I don't think, I mean, I look at both. I think it's always different with different children, but I was a single mom with my daughter and we grew up together. I mean, I was 21 when I had her. So it was like, I was a little girl and she was a little girl and we were just trying to kind of figure it out together. And so I was like you, I definitely probably overshared, but I also equipped her in ways that I wasn't equipped from her understanding of the experiences that I'd had, from personal safety to education to relationships and navigating careers and mistakes I made or things I did well. And I think too often kids go home to spaces where they don't get to have those really open, honest communications, and it cripples them in communication style because they think, oh, I can't talk about that, or I can't discuss the time I made a mistake. It's always like, mom was always perfect. And I'm like, no, mom was a dumpster fire. Like, let's talk about some of that stuff, because I would rather her know, yes, I made these mistakes, but yes, I also corrected them. And I think look at that way with our son as well, where no matter what I'm doing, I'm telling him all the things, like as if he's going to respond. And he has a couple words here, and deet is his when he says happy, and that sometimes that's all I get. But he's getting to hear me talk about things, and I don't ever think that's a bad thing. I don't.
Okay.
Personally, for me, I feel like as parents, it is most important for us to be real and honest with our kids. I feel like, because I know me growing up, most of the adults around me, all of them acted like they did nothing wrong. They never had a misstep. There was never any problems. The adults didn't argue. Everything was just hunky dory all the time. And the thing is I grew up through that, and then I become an adult, and it's, oh, okay, so that's supposed to be life. Okay, why am I constantly arguing? Why am I always having problems? And it was because I was never prepared for that. I had no expectation that life was actually going to be exceptionally difficult. For me, I have a rule that I've had forever. If you are old enough to ask a question, you are old enough to get an answer. So for me, whenever my kids ask a question, I give them as much of the truth and as much of it as I possibly can. Obviously, I'm not going to pull up videos and show the 8-year-old how the birds and the bees work. But if the 5-year-old asks, where do babies come from? You shouldn't tell them, well, they come from the stork. because then at that point you're gonna start putting thoughts in their head. Well, what else did they tell me that wasn't quite true? That was just a little bit off. And so for me, that aspect is very important. As the parent, when you look at your kid and you tell them this is the way something is, they don't need to go, well, is that actually true? They need to know that you're telling them the truth. And at the same time, you need to be able to sit down with them and go, hey, don't just take my word for this. Let me show you why this is the way it is, either with some form of scientific evidence or my own life experiences. And I feel like a lot of parents, that's where they drop the ball, is they don't get on that personal level with their kids, because I'm supposed to be the parent, you're supposed to be the child. It's just supposed to be I dictate. And I feel like that's wholly and completely wrong in how you're supposed to raise your kids.
Yeah. I used to do and we still do this. She's almost 25, but we used to, when she was like early middle school years, probably like 10, 11-ish, where those years where school is a little different and there's bullying and there's lots of different things. And we started this thing called 3 questions. And it was whoever decided to play this game had to ask the first 3 questions of the other person. And the only rule was that you had to tell all of the truth. And so it was this really beautiful time for sometimes questions that I was not anticipating she wanted to know. And it was things that opened the lines of communication in a way that nothing else probably would have. But she also knew I was still her mom. So, I think there's the fine line between trying to be their best friend and being their parent. And so you kind of play on that line a lot, I think, a lot of times. But she knew the difference. Like when we have those conversations, we're having a full honest conversation. And then, you don't clean your room, we're going to have a conversation about that too. So it's kind of a balancing act of, sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you get it wrong, and it's just part of it.
Jeremy and I have actually used something very similar with my kids. They hate it. I mean, they despise it. But every time they do something wrong, if there is a punishment, there is also going to be an explanation and a conversation about that punishment. But we do the same thing when they do good things as well. If they come home and bring something to us that they want to brag about, you're going to get the good job, congratulations. But we're also going to have a talk about that, because I need to understand why you're so excited.
Right.
So it sounds like establishing, communication patterns is something we all seem to agree is very important. I can say for myself that I absolutely did not receive that. Now, my parents, my dad, he was dyslexic. My mom was not diagnosed anything, but my parents would also be in their 70s at this point if they were still with me. So that's a completely different generation. Do you think that we're making progress in these parent-child relationships from generation to generation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're definitely making progress. There's more communication, and communication is how it's a way of expansion. It's the way we evolve.
Personally, I don't think it's that simple. I don't think you can say it has gotten better, because that would be if everybody was exposed to the same thing. In some cases, the people that are exposed to these thoughts and that take them in, and it gains root and it actually like blooms in their thought process, yes, those people are they're going to wind up being better for it. But there is an entire section of the population that what we're talking about is a thought that has never even occurred to them, never crossed their visual, their auditory, nothing. And so for them, it's going to be more of the same until somebody comes in and shines that light and goes, hey, why don't you look at this thing over here and check this out? But that's for me, I absolutely and wholly despise generalizations, even though in our day-to-day life we use them so often. Because most of the time, whatever generalization it is you're making, it's actually wrong, because there are going to be some that's yes, and there's going to be some that's no. A lot of my friends had this huge joke. Whenever they'd ask me a question, they would always get the same response: yes and no. And then I would have to explain why it was yes and then why it was no.
Not
That was
every,
all I had.
I was gonna say, not everybody at once. So no, Stone, you've looked very contemplative over the last several comments. I'd love to know what's going through your mind.
Well, I'm just thinking of different research papers that have been talking about, that have been on the topics that we're discussing, and it's so vast. It's really difficult to do quantitative and qualitative research on sociological issues, especially relating to autism and in particular children. But in saying that, most of the research that's been done is on children, not on adults. So the conversation that we're having, there's a lot of speculation. We're talking about our lived experience as opposed to providing evidence, because this is a new area. When I look at my lived experience of how it was when I was a child, and I didn't have a diagnosis until I became an adult, and that awareness gave me a lot more empathy for my children, and so they've come into this world with a lot more resources, more support, and then they have me. You know, Papa's not gonna allow any shenanigans to happen. So if I'm looking at their experience through that lens, of course I'm going to say, hey, it's better for them. But there are so many people who don't have that scenario, and there are several countries on the planet, even where I live in France, they don't have the same level of acknowledgement and care for neurodivergence as it is in Australia. In Australia, it's much better supported. In the US, there's knowledge about it, but it's not as supported. So that's a thing. It's a thing. What country you're born into, or what country you have access to, that impacts the level of support and awareness and love that you can get for your scenario.
I mean, you're not wrong, because a generation ago, our community almost as a whole was seen as damaged and dysfunctional and put away in the shadows. Now we're changing that narrative. We are a groundbreaking generation, and when I say we, I mean like the 30 to 60 age range, because so many of us have diagnoses for our children that led to our own diagnosis versus being in that first round, where I don't know if I would say I was lucky to have an early diagnosis, because there was so little that was actually understood about it. They did as much damage as good.
Yeah. No, I've said this on a couple different interviews before, but when I got my ADD diagnosis, I think it was like 10. And I remember going through this whole series of testings and appointments with this doctor. And on the other side of it, what I really felt like was I was a problem to solve, not a little girl to love. And I think, one, that's horribly sad, but two, it also is why I am such an advocate for my kids, because I never want them to feel like whatever way they move in the world, they're not going to be loved and accepted and championed for that, because the world is hard enough. It is ugly in a lot of places out there. And so if we can't create those spaces for our children, that they know they're safe and will be advocated for and loved and all of that, those environments can be that much harder for them. And that's tough.
Yeah. I have a bias to having a diagnosis earlier, especially for women, because the diagnostic criteria for women is so different than it is for men. But when they're children, that gap is not as vast. And by having a diagnosis early, it means that we can have access to the appropriate support. What we have currently doesn't level the playing field, as a saying, but at least we're not living in a cardboard box under a bridge.
Yeah.
True.
So one of the things that I keep hearing everybody say is essentially love your kids. Now, I know that's a very, very simple statement. What does that actually, I don't want to say what does love look like, because that just sounds so haughty, but what does it look like for each of you? How do you express that for your children?
Well, I want to share a scenario. So there was a client that I was working with, and she had a son who was aggressive. He was autistic and aggressive, and they were living in a rental. And so he would put holes in the wall and, threaten violence and these type of things. And she was at her wit's end. And so she ended up saying, I need to put him up for adoption, or I need to get him away from me because I don't have the skill set to manage him. And there were a lot of people in our community, our local neurodiverse community, that were shaming her for doing that. Love shows up in a lot of different ways, and I think someone hearing about that scenario, our gut is to say, oh, well, you should never give your child up. You should always take care of your child. But none of us are in that situation. We don't have someone with a hammer bashing walls, and you wake up in the morning and they have a knife standing over you. That can be jarring. Love is also preparatory. And by that, I mean, here's an example. If I go to the store and I'm getting something, I'm always thinking of my children. What does this one need? What does this person need? And that's automatic. That's not, I don't have to create a list. That's just the beingness of being a parent, of loving our child. But not everyone has that memo. Sometimes you have parents who might have multiple co-occurring conditions. Maybe they have a type of bipolar where they're not able to focus on their children. So in these cases, having a conversation about what does love look like for a child, it's relevant, because not everyone is across that. So if I talk about my own lived experience with my children, it's listening. What is it that they need? And not just need in a way of physical things, but when my son is trying to tell me for the 20th time, he's trying to show me this thing about what is it, Roblox or whatever it is he's trying to show me. Yeah, I'm present. Yeah. Do I want to look at that? No, I don't. But he's very interested. So
I completely agree. I mean, Jeremy and I, we're our littlest one, she's number 7. And so I cannot tell you the number of times I have heard the same stories come from different people. But when she brings me a flower and says, "Look, mommy, do you see all the petals?" I look just as amazed as I was when the first one brought me a flower and said, "Look, mommy, do you see all the amazing Because it's about engagement, being
Yeah.
in that moment with them. Because that's what they'll remember. When I'm long in the ground and they have grandchildren and great grandchildren of their own, it's those moments with you that they remember, not 40 years of arguments, unless those
Mhm.
were the moments.
Did you guys ever watch, I think it was Mad TV, and it was like Simon, and he'd be like, look what I can do, see what I can do. And he'd do this like little leg flip. And it was like absolutely nothing spectacular. I feel like that's parenthood. Like you're going to hear the same stories over a million times. You're going to, like my daughter was, her and her little friends were the Cheetah Girls back then. And so it was like, oh, let me tell you what it was like, second grade tea, which was completely ridiculous nonsense, but she couldn't wait to talk about it. And I think you have to be excited for whatever is they're excited about, because I look at kind of it from an exterior standpoint, like the world isn't going to be as excited as you are for them. And so you've got to really foster that for them. And I think for me, love looks different for each of my kids, because one of them I grew up with, and the other one I'm getting to parent with someone amazing, and which is a huge blessing. But I think for me, I think love looks like finding time that's disconnected from everything else and just doing what they want to do, whether it's sit and watch mermaids, it's play Play-Doh, or, go to a movie because she loves movies. Like you really have to, every kid wants different things from us as parents, and figuring out how and where to show up for them in the ways that they need. I'm still learning that. I still don't always get it right, but like we were at Costco earlier today, and Costco's loud and noisy and tons of people, and he was sitting in the basket, so he wasn't running around, and my husband was off getting something, and he just like he grabbed my hand and he just pulled me into him, and he was just like, I think it was just too much, and he didn't want me to pick him up. He just wanted me to wrap my arms around him, and he just kind of like nuzzled into me. And then I asked, do you want your headset, because he's got his little headphones, and put those on. And then he was just like happy as a clam, couldn't, he was good. And so the more you pay attention, the more you learn, and the more you can adjust what you've got to do or what they need from you. And yeah, I think that's, for me, that's the one thing I've learned, that I'm still learning, because it's different all the time.
I think on I think at the end of the day, we all need what we need. And our kids are the same, are the same way. Sometimes you just need a hug from your significant other. In that particular moment, he just needed you to wrap your arms around him. And then he was perfectly fine. So we all need what we need. We don't all need the same thing. We just need to pay attention to what it is that our kids need, and understand that it's our job to provide that for them. If they need a hug, it's our job to provide them that hug. It doesn't matter if you had a bad day. It doesn't matter if you just stubbed your toe. If your kid needs a hug, give them a hug. If they need whatever it is they need, that's what you need to give them from time to time. And for me, that's love. Putting whatever your child needs at the forefront. It doesn't matter whether I want it, whether I like it or not. It's if they need it. And from me, I created a lot of like rules for myself. And one of them that I created was that if my kids come to me and go, Dad, I need a hug, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I drop whatever it is I have. If I'm in the middle of a conversation with somebody, hang on a second. Because for me, that's important. Them understanding that absolutely nothing else is as important to me as them. That to me is one of the most important things about being a dad.
I completely agree.
And
I think giving a kid a place where they know that if they can go there and they are always the most important thing in that moment, builds a very strong foundation for themselves.
I enjoy what you were saying, Gabi, about tapping into your child's love language. We are, if we're old enough, we may remember being from an era where parents said, what was it? Do as I say, not as I do. It was quite dictatorial, and we were raised using the map that our parents got from their parents rather than best practices. And I think most adults know that the way you love someone is the way they want to be loved. And I think more people are starting to get that message for our children as well. Look, what is it that they need? What is their preference for the way that they want to be loved? And sometimes they may not have a language for that. But as parents, we it's almost like a little adventure we get to go on to find out, especially if our children are nonverbal, going on an adventure trying to find, okay, what is it that gives them more spoons? What is it that makes them feel seen and heard and acknowledged?
And let's be real,
So,
even nonverbal children will tell you what they want.
Mhm.
You may not understand the words or the body language that they are using in that moment, but they will tell you exactly what they want and what they need. How do we lose that as adults? That's that's a whole nother show conversation. How do we lose the ability to tell people what we need and want? We're not even gonna go there.
yeah.
We got like 5 minutes. I don't think we can dig that one. Dig a hole for that one in 5 minutes and get out.
Okay, so as Gabi pointed out, we are getting close to the top of the hour. So any last thoughts for our listeners? Stone?
Yeah, if I'm to summarize what we've been discussing, what comes up for me is having patience and grace, and not for someone else or another situation, but for self, and to cultivate that patience and grace for self as an invitation for our ecosystem. So I'm thinking about myself as a parent and the way I interact with my children. It's not that I need to have more patience. I mean, I love being with them, but having the grace to not feel as if I'm being interrupted when I'm working, or these types of to be able to focus wholly on what's happening for them, because it goes by so quickly. I mean, we blink and they're born, and we blink again and they're moving out. It happens fast.
I can echo that sentiment, because it's a very weird thing to have. My daughter was 19 when our son was born. So I have a 25-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it goes way faster than I think I realized. And because of the circumstances in that relationship, she didn't get the mom that she deserved. And so I think as parents, when you look at raising kids, neurodivergent or otherwise, the more time that you take to figure out your stuff and figure out why you act the way you do and what things that you've brought from childhood or relationships or whatever, that I think is a form of self-care. I think it's also a way that we can make sure that we can self-regulate ourselves when we're heightened, because it calls for us to need to do that. And so ways that we can figure out to help ourselves get to a place where we're really healthy will not only be an example for them, but will also help us parent them in ways that is most impactful for them. And that's kind of the way that I look at parenthood now. I spent many, many years in survival mode of parenthood, and now I get to learn and figure more stuff out as I'm figuring out everything else. But I think that's important.
Jeremy?
Yes.
At the end of the day, we gotta love them, and that's at the end of the day. That's all. That's as complicated and as simple as it is.
I mean, you're not wrong. Continue to listen, continue to share with them. I mean, shared experience is the spice of life. No one should have to walk through it alone. And we were kind of given our kids to protect. The way I look at it, we were given the kids we were given because we're the one that can protect them best. Stone's like, I don't know about all that now.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
But no, I mean, like, we are not broken people. Our children are not broken. We just have a completely unique and beautiful team that we are forming, and we have to learn to dance together with them to our own music. I mean, you know, they've always said we all dance to the beat of our own drum, and that is never more so true, I think, than in a neurodivergent family.
Oh, like The Incredibles.
I can live with that.
I like what Stone said earlier when we were talking about the difficulties of raising a neurodivergent child, where it's not difficult, but it's different. Because at the end of the day, when you step back and actually objectively look at raising a child, if you look at raising a child in any other culture besides your own, you're going to think it's difficult. But it's easy in your own culture. The thing we've got to understand is that we're neurodivergent. Each one of us is a culture unto ourselves. We have to get inside the head of each of us so that we understand what we're looking at. That's why I loved when Stone said it's different.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I am a culture.
We are all a culture.
I like that, Jeremy.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I thank everybody for our time. We have almost run the clock out. Next week, we're going to have another great conversation. We will have, it will be the productivity myth, rethinking success for the neurodivergent mind. I know Stone just loves that word success. So I know we're going to have a great conversation next week. If anybody would like to be a guest, has a topic idea, would like to comment or discuss with the community anything that we have talked about today, you can find us on the kfred.com forums. And as always, your calls, if we're inside our hour, can be directed to the I can't talk KFred phone system. Because we want to have those engagements. I mean, we love talking to each other, but we are starting to talk in circles a little bit. I think we talk about communication and listening and love almost every single week. I think I love it. So this has been another episode of Neurodivergent News. See you next week, same time, same place. That's Sunday, 5 p.m. Central for those of you in the States. And